Hey guys, Trainer DC here, coming at you with another video. In our last video on this channel, we discussed the multi-region Pokemon remake, the MMO that may or may not be coming anymore. Card above to that video if you haven't seen it yet, but one thing I wanted to discuss building off of that video is Pokemon's roadmap for the rest of this decade. If you guys don't know, the Terra leak that happened last year revealed to us Pokemon's plans for the rest of this decade. 2026 was supposed to be Pokemon Winds and Waves, followed by the DLC for Winds and Waves in 2027. 2027 or later, so let's just say 2027 or 2028, was supposed to be Legends Galar, while 2028 or later was supposed to be the multi-region MMO remake, with 2030 being Generation 11. Obviously, those plans have shifted, given that Pokemon Winds and Waves is not coming this year. Pokemon Winds and Waves got delayed till 2027, meaning that the entire roadmap has been pushed back. Not only that, but we have the fact that Project Karasu has leaked to be the next Pokemon titles after Pokemon Winds and Waves, meaning that Legends Galar is not coming in 2027 or 2028 like initially leaked to us. So in this video today, I wanted to discuss and predict what the rest of this decade will look like for Pokemon and when exactly we could expect to see Generation 11 for the franchise. So first and foremost, obviously we know that next year is going to be Pokemon Winds and Waves. Based on recent leaks, it looks like unfortunately this is not going to come until the second half of the year, meaning that I would imagine that we're not going to get any other mainline entries or DLC for Pokemon Winds and Waves in 2027. Next year is Winds and Waves, and that's going to be it. So that means that in 2028, we're looking at the DLC for Winds and Waves. Pokemon Winds and Waves DLC will definitely be coming out in 2028, but will we get more than that? Will we get the Project Karasu, whatever that game ends up being, or is that something that's pushed back to 2029? I could see either happening, quite frankly, because the roadmap is such a mess right now and everything is in such flux. We saw this happen with Pokemon Legends EA, where we got the DLC released the same year or very shortly after the game came out, because Legends EA, for those of you that don't know, was initially supposed to come out back in 2024 before getting delayed to 2025, and the DLC was always meant to come out in 2025. So they kept to the roadmap for the DLC, but shifted things because of Legends EA. So the DLC maybe was going to come out in the summer, but instead came out in December. We might see something very similar happen with the Winds and Waves DLC, where maybe it was meant to come out in the summer of 2027 part 1 and the fall of 2027 for part 2, but given that Winds and Waves got delayed to 2027, if it's coming out in, let's just say, October, November, that most likely means the DLC isn't coming out until maybe the spring of 2028, or even they could accelerate it and have it come out in the winter time if they want to fit Project Karasu into 2028 as well. That remains to be seen, obviously. So for argument's sake, Project Karasu is coming in either 2028 or 2029, and if that is indeed the case, the following game after Project Karasu would be this multi-region MMO remake, which I don't really think is happening anymore. So if Project Karasu internally ends up being a Legends game, then I think we're going to get an Ilka remake in 2029 or 2030, depending on whether or not 2028 or 2029 ends up being Project Karasu. But if Project Karasu is something else entirely and is not a Legends game, then I would expect the game after Project Karasu to be a Legends game. So for argument's sake, let's just say an Ilka style remake or a Legends game comes out in 2029 or 2030, which in turn would mean that Generation 11 would release in 2031. That is my timeline for Pokemon over the next half decade or so. I think next year, well, we know next year, I should say, is going to be Winds and Waves. 2028 is going to be the Winds and Waves DLC. Most likely 2029 is going to be Project Karasu, followed by an Ilka style remake or a Legends game in 2030, with 2031 being Pokemon Generation 11. The reason why I'm expecting an Ilka remake in 2030 is because the Pokemon Company knows that Game Freak cannot put up with this grueling development cycle that they've been doing for the past decade or so. We've seen that over the past 5 years that they haven't kept up with it. We're used to getting a Pokemon game every single year outside of 2015, but that hasn't happened over the past few years. We didn't get a Pokemon game in 2024, and we're not getting a Pokemon game in 2026. I think that the Pokemon Company realizes that they can't keep up with this. Game Freak can't keep doing these 1-year turnarounds, these games every single year. It's really like a 3-year turnaround because these games go into development prior to, them getting announced, obviously. So it's really this 3-year development cycle. That's just not feasible anymore. So I think that a way for them to combat that is by having an Ilka style remake take up these gap years. So we're going to see an Ilka game, I would imagine, or sorry, I should say a Pokemon Works game, given that that's the newly formed company title. We're going to see a Pokemon Works 1-to-1 Faithful remake at some point over the next half decade. I would be absolutely shocked if that doesn't happen. Therefore, I think Generation 11 is coming out in 2031. It is at all possible as well that we get Generation 11 in 2032, but I think personally a 5-year development cycle, a 5-year hiatus between generations is just too much time. I think that 3 years we can all agree upon being too quick of a turnaround for a new generation. It just doesn't work anymore. It really, ever since the 3D era of Pokemon launched, it's been very grueling on Game Freak to develop a new generation every 3 years. We saw the shortcuts they took with X and Y and some of the shortcuts that they took with Sun and Moon, the performance issues that had on the 3DS, but I would argue for Sun and Moon, that's more so a culprit of the 3DS not being able to handle the game as opposed to anything to do with the development timeline of it. But nevertheless, we did not get a Pokemon Z. We never got that Kalos revisit until Legends ZA came out last year. So I think that since Pokemon's made the jump to 3D, Game Freak has been really struggling keeping up with this development timeline that the Pokemon company has set for them. And I think that Pokemon has really started to realize that we can't keep putting out the games unfinished like we have been. We've seen the negative reception to Sword and Shield. We've seen the negative reception to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And because of that, we're delaying Winds and Waves to 2027. We're breaking the 3-year cycle for a new generation, and it's going to 4 years now. And not only that, it's going to 5 years, which is a little absurd to me. I think 5 years is too much. So therefore, I think what they will do going forward is we'll get our new generational titles. We'll get our DLC the following year. We'll then get our Legends game from Game Freak a year after that. We'll get a Pokemon Works Ilka-styled 1-to-1 remake the gap year that's after that, followed by a new generational title. That way, we get a new Pokemon product every single year, and we don't have the gap years that we've had in 2024 or 2026. And you might say to yourself, Trainer DC, why can't we have a gap year? Why do we need to get a Pokemon game every single year? And look, you're not wrong. We don't need to get a Pokemon game every single year. The thing is, though, is Pokemon is one of those franchises like Call of Duty that I think drastically benefits from having a product release every single year. And we know that President Ishihara of the Pokemon Company has said such. He has said in interviews before that their goal for Pokemon is to have a product release every single year. And I think they've realized that that's not feasible anymore for Game Freak to do on their own, which is why we saw a separate studio work on a mainline Pokemon game in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. It's the entire reason why Pokemon Works was founded in the first place. This franchise is going to drastically change going forward, and I think because of that, we have a better idea as to what to expect from them over the next half decade or so. 2027's Winds and Waves. The DLC's coming in 28. 2029 is going to be Project Karasu, which is most likely going to be a new Legends game. 2030 is going to be your 1-to-1 BSP Ilka-styled remake, and 2031 is probably going to be Gen 11. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm 100% sure here because obviously no one's sure here. No one knows what they're thinking behind the scenes, but I think this is what they're going to try to structure it like going forward. Whether or not the games I mentioned here happen or not, whether or not Project Karasu ends up being a Legends game or something else entirely, whether or not we get an Ilka-style remake in 2029 or 2030, we're going to have a Pokemon game every year going forward. I'd be shocked if that doesn't happen. It's just that we're going to see other studios come in here to make these remakes, to make these Pokemon games while Game Freak handles the main generations as well as the Legends games. Legends games are meant to be their more experimental titles that target an older audience, while the mainline Pokemon game is meant to be the new generation title that we all experienced growing up as kids for both young and old fans to enjoy. That's meant to be your entry point into the series, while the Legends games are meant to be for a more older audience. Yes, you could still be a kid and enjoy a Pokemon Legends game, but they are not targeting you directly. They are targeting the core gamer who grew up with some of the earlier generations. I think we have a pretty good idea as to what we can expect from Pokemon over the next 5 to 6 years. Anyways, let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think about all this. What do you guys think about my roadmap prediction for Pokemon from now through the year 2031? Do you think I'm onto something and this is exactly what they're going to do? Or do you think I'm off in my prediction and you don't think this is what Pokemon is going to do over the next half decade or so? If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this from Trainer DC. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.